discoveries. There is the Japanese word encounter is a homophone of the I and the interjection in the Visaya language. The four researchers shared, we share the language Visaya. I said when something new is learned, when we say the I, we find something new. And the I in Japanese is encounter. So we chose this name for our project. As the chair of this panel, I will just give some instructions. We will have four presenters, and each of them has 15 minutes for presentation. And after all the presentations are finished, we will open the floor for questions and comments. Okay, so, and those who are participating online, I'm very sorry for you are not being able to see our faces, but I think you can still put comments or write your questions in the chat box. So please do so during our presentations. So let me invite our first presenter, Christine Cordenillo.
It's presenting online, bro.
It's presenting online.
Pero there are also something to do with the board.
Alright, so sorry for the technical difficulties. Again, good morning to each and every one of you. My name is Christine Cordenillo, and I am from Davao City, Philippines, in Mindanao particularly. I will be sharing with you this morning a short encounter with the Manobo community of Kapalong, Davao del Norte, Philippines. It is actually one of the ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines, particularly in Mindanao. So I would like to start this presentation by giving you this question of what is a good life. So I will not particularly answer this question right now, but I am hoping that each of you will think of this, about what is a good life as I go through the presentation of the encounter with the Manobo. So the Manobo community that I went through in Mindanao is particularly located in Sitio Lunulun. So if you go through the map in there, it's 20 kilometers from the municipal center. So if you see there at the bottom, it's encircled in red, is the municipal center called Maniki. And then at the top, encircled in red again, that is the community. And if you see the picture, that is the kind of road that you have to go through in order to go to the community. You will take around 2 hours to go there, not because of the distance, but because of the difficulty of the road. And you can only access it through a single motorcycle, or what we locally call as habal-habal. And in that community, they have their own leadership structure. So first, they have the Dato, which is the overall tribe leader. He actually handles the disputes in the community, local disputes, and as well as resources, the distribution of resources. The other leader is the Bailan. or the community healer, and then we also have the Bagani or the warriors. Now, if the picture is open, if you're watching via Zoom, the one on the left is the Bagani or the warrior, and the one on the right is the tribal leader. Now, this community, it's important to note that they are into subsistence farming. They don't use money that much traditionally, or not at all in the traditional sense of their community practice. And their year begins with the planting season, which is around March. It is also another important thing to note that prior to the year 2000, they do not have access to our calendar, the Gregorian calendar. So they identify the beginning of the year through the planting season, because that is after the amihan season, or the trade, where the trade winds happen, and there is heavy rain, so they cannot plant at all. And they start the planting season with a ritual called Magsunggod sa Kamanga. I'm sorry I was not able to give a definite English translation for this, but they offer this, or they do the ritual prior to the slash and burn clearing at the center of the field. I will show you later how the layout of the field looks. And they will offer to the rice god called Ibabasok some prayers, and then chickens together with the rice seedlings that they will be using. And they believe that it will ensure successful harvest and that their farms will not be attacked by pests. Now, if you can see there, that's the original drawing that I did during my fieldwork, so it's not really that nice, but their field is actually circular. There is actually a logical reason as to why they do that, because on the side, those are dawa plants. So this is actually the dawa plant, the one that is shown by the dato, the tribal leader. So that one is the earliest that they can harvest. So in 2 to 3 months, they can already harvest that, meaning after planting, they already have something to eat, because during the amihan season, they only have root crops to feed or to survive. And then the corn, the one with the lines, I put the lines because the distance between each corn plant is 5 steps to both sides and 5 steps to the front and the back. The reason also is that so that they can easily access it to harvest it in 4 months. And then after 6 months, they can now harvest their local variation of rice, which is also called ata rice. And then afterwards, they can now plant vegetables around the field, and then during the amihan season, they can only plant root crops such as kamote, or sweet potatoes, karlang or taro, balanghoy or cassava, and then gabi, another variation of taro, and then tubo or sugarcane. So on the other side, there is also the healing practices. So the Bailan acts as the community healer and deals with the community diseases. So healing also involves ritual. And then they call this panubad-tubad. The ritual is called panubad-tubad. And it's a prayer calling the diwata or the fairies and the abyans or the spirit guides. They have different names for different types of spirits. And each being, like every tree, every stone has its own god. So that's how they deal with it. And then the concept of healing and wellness for the Manobo community is that good health means you are abdik or you have vigor, madasigon, you are peaceful, malipayon, you are happy, and then sanag ang panagway or ugmaawang, meaning you have a bright aura and you have an overall positive disposition in life. While illness, on the contrary, they call it da'u or darau, depending on the slang, means that a person is not feeling well and that something is wrong, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. And then there are major two types of causes of illness, which is one is mauuran, which is a consequence to a negative action. And then second is it's inflicted by the busaw, another type of spirit, either because the busaw is attracted to a person or you have offended the busaw or the spirit. And then prior to the healing ritual, the Bailan will conduct a diagnosis using an egg. And if during that ritual, the yellow portion, the middle portion of the egg is intact, it means that the person will be healed. And then depending on the cause of the illness, the ritual will involve asking for forgiveness or offering of white chicken or pigs to the spirits. Another thing about this community is that it's a displaced community. So originally they settled by the side of the river at the bottom part of the mountain where they resettled, but they were forced to move because of armed conflict. So they are now located at the mid part of the mountain, and then on top of the mountain is a military detachment. And then by the side of the resettlement area is a new road construction. I am trying to give those information because we can use that later on as we try to answer the question of what is the good life. Now, what are the impacts of displacement? I wanted to highlight the two impacts of displacement in terms of their subsistence farming and traditional healing practices. So, military restrictions prohibit them from visiting their previous resettlement where their farms are located. They are also nomadic people. So once the soil in that particular area is no longer that healthy, they move their farms to another area. So they move their farms every 2 to 3 years, according to them. But right now, since they do not have access to the forest, they can't do that anymore. And then traditional healing practices, their healing practice, as I mentioned earlier, involves prayer, sacrifices, and medicinal plants from the forest, but since they are also restricted, they are forced to rely on modern medicine, which they do not have access as well. Well, if they have, it's very, very limited. Other impacts of displacement, but I did not focus on this when I did my research, was the close down of their indigenous school. So right now, children are now forced to attend mainstream curriculum classes in these classrooms. So it's not that clear in the room, but those are the classrooms. And then the nearby road constructions created a demand for stores, and it also opened for access to junk foods, which is not part of their usual diet, and the need for money, and then their leaders are now required to have the acknowledgement of the local government. So now I go back to the question of what is a good life. So when I asked them during an FGD, most of them would say that a good life for them is the ability to provide for their needs. And if we go back to what I mentioned earlier, most of their needs comes from the forest. Hence, they said, a good life is to be able to access and protect the forest without fear and restrictions. Another thing that they wanted to note is that they also want their children to be able to learn and write. And it's actually funny because the reason is that they don't want their children to be deceived by the mainstream culture. So that's actually the reason why they wanted to learn and write. But at the same time, they wanted to pass on their Manobo culture to their children. Now, these are the lingering questions that I have, which until now I cannot really have an answer to, because I understand myself as somebody who lived in the city that development is essential. However, from this study, I realized that there is a need for mutual respect and consultation among all stakeholders. But these two questions, I still have no answer. So with the ongoing rapid development in the area, with the road constructions and everything, how can the Manobo and other indigenous communities in the Philippines preserve their culture? And then second, how can the public and private sector help in upholding the right and for self-determination among our indigenous peoples? And with those questions, I leave you and thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Dean. I'm very sorry for the technical trouble that we are having. We are getting some help, but we cannot resolve it at the moment. And we cannot share the screen either now. So please be patient and stay with us. We will run this with audio only for the time being. Thank you very much. So we will invite Carlo.
Maybe we can share screen here.
Okay, so let us try to use another computer which is connected with the Wi-Fi. We hope we can share the screen and show our faces. Please